Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Tony T's Tune Talk, available at the Port Washington Public Library's YouTube channel. I'm Tony Chiguardo, and I'm ready to talk tunes. You know, if there's anything that we have learned from rock history, it's that it is very difficult to keep a band together. We have seen huge feuds, lineup changes, and death-related breakups. We have seen bands simply come to the end of their natural lives. But we have also seen reunions, and there have been many in rock and roll's history. Some made us wish that things had simply been left as they were. But other reunions, whether for one-night-only live events, full-blown tours, or studio projects, were highly successful both artistically and commercially. Here are a few of them. Like any other band that hailed from Liverpool, the Searchers did very well in the 1960s. They scored 11 top 40 hits between 1963 and 1966 in the UK, including 3 number ones with Needles and Pins, Sweets for My Sweet, and Don't Throw Our Love Away. There were also a total of 8 hits in the US, including their number 3 cover version of Love Potion number 9. But by the end of the decade, the group's chart presence slowed down. But the Searchers as a band did not. They continued to hone their skills and tighten their sound during their live shows, where they added a ton of modern musical punch to their incredible harmonies. But they had taken a lengthy break from recording. After seeing the band perform at a show, Seymour Stein, the founder of Sire Records, offered them a home on his New Wave label, where they would share a roster with the likes of the Ramones, the Talking Heads, the Dead Boys, and in time, the Pretenders. The Searchers got onto Sire and released what was considered to be their reunion album in 1979. It was a self-titled release that featured originals and covers of songs from Tom Petty, The Records, Bob Dylan. It also included their take on Mickey Jupp's Switchboard Susan, which was released at around the same time by and made the charts for one Nick Lowe. The album was produced by Pat Moran, who had produced records for Bebop Deluxe, Dr. Feelgood, and Rush. Yes, that Rush. The Searchers, Rush. Anyway, the album was a sonic powerhouse, and it still holds up today. The Searchers' 1979 release can be played back-to-back with the Searchers material from the early 60s and would sound like a very logical progression. And it can also stand up to any classic album from the time that was recorded by the most progressive of its harmony-based power pop contemporaries. Just great stuff. Now, this band was never meant for the faint of heart, but while the passage of time and the rise of rap and death metal may have made the Sex Pistols' only true studio album, Nevermind the Bollocks, seem somewhat tame, the band's 1996 reunion tour proved that their songs could still pack quite a punch when they were performed live. The band's Filthy Lucre tour featured the 4 original members of the Sex Pistols, including Glenn Matlock on bass. He had actually been replaced by Sid Vicious just before the band released their one and only album. Now, while rumors circulated for years that Matlock was fired because he admitted to liking the Beatles, the truth was that Matlock had actually quit the band because of the tension between the band members that was allegedly being encouraged by the group's then manager, Malcolm McLaren. Filthy Lucre Live is the 1996 live album by the reformed Sex Pistols. The album was recorded at London's Finsbury Park on June 23, 1996. While there was extensive overdubbing done of the lead and backing vocals, something done by most bands these days, the album has a rockin', raw sound that could only be made by the Sex Pistols. Check it out. And now from the somewhat ridiculous to the sublime. 2 brothers from Kentucky influenced a slew of budding young musicians, and that influence really cannot be overstated. Jim Jerome of People magazine summed up the Everly Brothers, Phil and Don, as 2 primordial presences from the dawn of rock history, without whose precise vocal harmonics there would have been no McCartney and Lennon, no Simon and Garfunkel, no California rock sound. Having sung on their parents' radio show since they were children, the Everly Brothers crossed over into the field of popular music with their 1957 smash Bye Bye Love. Soon renowned for the harmonious blending of their voices, they had a string of hits in the late 1950s and early 1960s that included Wake Up Little Susie, Bird Dog, Kathy's Clown, and I'll Do My Crying in the Rain. But the change of style that took place in the mid-60s, ironically one spearheaded by the Beatles, who were deeply influenced by the Everly Brothers' use of harmony, decreased the demand for what had been considered traditional American rock and roll. Though they had continued to perform live and cut records into the early 1970s, tensions began to develop between the brothers in their collective business identity and in their individual personal lives. Both brothers suffered from drug abuse problems, with Don's issues leading to 2 failed suicide attempts. Both brothers also experienced multiple divorces. As an escape from this ever-continuing treadmill, Don told his brother Phil that their performances at Knott's Berry Farm near Los Angeles in July of 1973 would be their last. Now, although Don had conquered his drug dependence, he showed up for one of the shows so drunk that a manager had to stop the show midway through the second of 3 scheduled sets. Furious at the situation and at his brother, Phil Everly stormed off stage, smashing his guitar to the floor before disappearing. In 1983, Don Everly decided that it was time to bury the hatchet, reunite, and make a comeback. Phil, having as little success as his brother did as a solo artist, fully agreed. 10 months later, the duo gave a much-publicized reunion concert at the Royal Albert Hall in London, England, which was videotaped and shown on the brand-new home box office cable network. The critics raved about it. Once again, Jim Jerome of People magazine commenting, "Once the Everlys buried the hatchet, it was as if they had never been away. Their fusion of sweet Appalachian harmonies, rock arrangements, and lyrical sentiment seemed, indeed, as powerful as ever." Yeah. After that reunion concert, the brothers recorded their first studio album in 10 years, EB-84, which also met with enthusiastic critical response. EB-84 even featured a song donated to the Everlys by Paul McCartney called On the Wings of a Nightingale, which Kurt Loder in a Rolling Stone review called almost impossibly perfect. Loder also went on to declare that EB-84, the Everlys have truly never sounded better, and concluded that these voices are so rich and so symbiotically attuned to each other that their effect seems to go beyond simple artistry and to resonate instead on a cellular level. I cannot help but agree wholeheartedly. EB-84 is a lovely piece of work. Soon after the release of the Fleetwood Mac album Time in 1995, the band's newest members, Billy Burnett and Becca Bramlett, departed to form the country duo Becca and Billy. Rather than continuing on, the band at that point simply opted to disband. In 1997, the Fleetwood Mac Rumors lineup of Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, Christine McVie, John McVie, and Mick Fleetwood agreed to perform together for the first time since 1987's Tango in the Night album for an MTV Unplugged special. The performance would result in a highly successful live reunion album called The Dance. Christine McVie left the band shortly afterwards while a tour was being planned to capitalize on the success of The Dance, citing her fear of flying as the primary reason for her departure. A studio album, unfortunately, was really not part of that initial plan. So what finally brought the entire band together into the studio for the first time in over 10 years? Well, ironically, it was a Lindsey Buckingham solo project. Buckingham was at work on his 4th solo album, and he decided to have Mick Fleetwood play drums on a couple of songs. He says, "Mick and I started out cutting tracks, and that didn't necessarily have any great signature to it," he says. "Just he and I, guitar and drums. Then we started with another bass player, and that didn't work out. Suddenly, he said, well, why don't we bring John in and see how that works?" He laughs. And that was when it started to move back into something. "So," he continues, "we got John down, and that worked out really well. Then we ended up getting Christine down. Suddenly, a great deal of the sound that makes up Fleetwood Mac is there. And at that point, I think some light bulbs went off at our label, Warner Brothers." Now, the fact that Warner Brothers would want to see the group get back together to commemorate the 25th anniversary of its best-selling album Rumors was really hardly a shock. But what was surprising was that the other band members, including the highly successful Stevie Nicks, wanted a true reunion in the studio as well. The reality was that the project was definitely going to sideline the release of a true Lindsey Buckingham solo album, but Buckingham ended up contributing a large portion of his songs to what would become the album Say You Will. To round out the album, Stevie Nicks even brought in some new material along with some leftovers from her previous albums. One of the songs, Smile at You, actually dates back to the Tusk sessions, but it was entirely re-recorded for Say You Will. Say You Will is the 17th and, as of 2020, most recent studio album by the British-American rock band Fleetwood Mac. It was released on April 15th, 2003. And it was the first Fleetwood Mac album since 1970's Kiln House that didn't include any songs written by Christine McVie. Her contributions are definitely evident in the two songs that had been originally recorded for the unreleased Lindsey Buckingham solo project. Say You Will debuted at number 3 with sales of 218,000. The album spent 2 months within the top 40 and was certified gold by the RIAA in July 2003 for 500,000 copies shipped in the US. To me, this album contains all of the ingredients that make up a great Fleetwood Mac album, especially if you're a fan of the songwriting and guitar work of Lindsey Buckingham. The album's midsection, the run of songs consisting of Red Rover, Say You Will, Peacekeeper, and Come, is one of the musical highlights from an older classic rock band to be released in the early 2000s. Really just great stuff. December 10th, 2007 saw the surviving members of Led Zeppelin perform a full-length concert together for the first time in more than 27 years. 3 of the 4 men who shared the stage that night seemed eager for this to be a new beginning. But as time continues to pass, it seems more and more clear that this was, in fact, Led Zeppelin's last stand. Thankfully, we are left with a fantastic document of that night's performance. The show at the O2 Arena in London was a tribute to Atlantic Records founder Ahmet Ertegun, and it was headlined by the biggest band that he had helped bring to the world stage, Led Zeppelin. There were less than 20,000 tickets available that night, but more than 20 million people applied for them, an official world record. Led Zeppelin had split up immediately following the death of their drummer John Bonham in 1980, and prior to the 2007 event, the surviving members had appeared together only twice, and neither performance was a success. Singer Robert Plant called their first reunion at Live Aid in 1985, which featured an unsure Phil Collins as the band's drummer, an atrocity. He also said that their appearance at Atlantic Records' 40th anniversary show in 1988 was foul. The band desperately needed this show to be bigger and much better. And wow, it was. Plant, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham's son Jason delivered an experience so engaging that none of them will ever again be able to sit through an interview without being asked about a reunion. Yet the reunion was really never destined to happen, as Robert Plant made clear within minutes of taking his last bow. While everyone else was celebrating with an epic backstage party, he left the venue because, quote, "I had to get away from it. I'd done it. I had to go. It was just too heavy. Beautiful, but talk about examining your own mortality. Crazy." Plant was much more interested in his solo career, which had just been reinvigorated with the release of Raising Sand, his album with Alison Krauss, that went on to win 5 Grammy Awards. Now, if that experience didn't truly detach him from Led Zeppelin's past, it at least proved that there was much more to him than Led Zeppelin. He said, "I've gone so far somewhere else, I almost can't relate to it," he said of their reunion show. "I know people care, but think about it from my angle. Pretty soon, I'm going to need help crossing the street." I doubt that, Robert. Anyway, his bandmates didn't feel the same. They all felt the old energy, and they wanted more. Eventually, they realized that Plant wasn't going to be persuaded to participate in a reunion, so they worked behind the scenes throughout 2008 searching for someone else to sing for them. In fact, one of the big names invited to try out was a fellow named, Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. The two camps offer conflicting stories as to why that didn't work out, but could that possibly come as a surprise to anyone? By January of 2009, after trying out a few vocalists and taking the project in a few different potential directions, the idea was officially abandoned. Jimmy Page's manager, Peter Mensch, officially announced that there are absolutely no plans for Led Zeppelin to continue. Zero. Frankly, I wish everybody would stop talking about it. If you didn't see them in 2007, you missed them. It's done. I can't be any clearer than that. He pointed out that they tried a few singers, but no one worked out. That was it. The whole thing is completely over now. Thankfully, if you weren't there, you really didn't miss it completely. A 16-camera shoot had been arranged at the show, and an overjoyed John Paul Jones, Led Zeppelin's bassist and keyboardist, offered to take on the project of mixing the live audio recordings from that momentous event. What we get on Celebration Day is a mature Led Zeppelin who are treating the most famous songs in their catalog with just the right amount of reverence and just the right amount of tweaking that an older band really needs to do to make songs like these soar. Jimmy Page, who had spent some time during Led Zeppelin's heyday indulging in substances that resulted in a number of sloppy shows, is at the top of his game. And while Robert Plant can't quite hit every note exactly as he did in the 70s, he gets the still present power in his voice to go exactly where he needs it to, and he delivers a tremendous performance. John Paul Jones and the late John Bonham's son, Jason, keep this powerful Zeppelin engine rolling along beautifully. If this is to be the final performance, it was a great final statement from one of rock and roll's most incredible bands. Well, that's all for now for my Tony T's Tune Talk look at great rock reunions and returns. Remember, hey, all of the excellent music that's been discussed here today can be found on the streaming services available through your local public library. Thanks for watching, and happy listening.